Good morning, colleagues, once again. My name is Kosie Tuntuli. I'm from the Research Capacity Development Unit at the Postgraduate School. I would like to welcome each and every one of you and thanking you for taking your time to attend today's session, Authorship and Publication Ethics, Navigating the Responsibilities. Colleagues, please note that this workshop is recorded for the purpose of those who didn't make it to access the recording of this workshop and those that attended for them to refer to the recording at a later stage on their convenient times. So the workshop is recorded and the resources will be shared on your respective module communities, which includes a PDRF community as well as the supervisor module community. So our workshop for today is authorship and publication ethics and navigating the, the responsibilities. This workshop is organized by the Research Capacity Development Unit at the Postgraduate School University of Johannesburg. It brings together a vibrant community of supervisors, academics, researchers, and postdoctoral research fellows who all play critical roles in the responsible production and dissemination of research. Why are we attending this workshop, or why are we having such a workshop, colleagues? In a rapidly evolving research landscape, the pressure to publish can sometimes blur the lines between ethical and unethical behavior. Today's workshop aims to clarify those lines by exploring what constitute ethical authorship and responsible publishing practices, how to determine authorship order, contribution, and accountability, how to avoid misconduct such as ghost authorship, gift authorship, and duplicate submissions, the roles of supervisors, co-authors, and journal editors in maintaining transparency in academic integrity. Understanding these principles is essential not only for protecting the integrity of scholarly work, but also for fostering respectful and fair collaborations. So our facilitator for today, we are honored to have Dr. Lorenzo David, who will go deeper and explaining us or sharing his insights on the discussion of today. Allow me to go now to our housekeeping rules. Please make sure I'll enable your mic. Please make sure that your mic is muted. However, you are more than welcome to just raise a hand if you do have a question or if you want to contribute. I have shared a slide with the discussion points. So if you want to contribute to any of the points, the 4 points that I've shared, you are more than welcome at any point of the workshop to raise a hand and make your contribution. Alternatively, you can type in your answer or your input under the chat, and then I will notify my facilitator that there is a response or there is a question under the chat. So as I've mentioned, the recording of this workshop will be shared to your respective Moodle communities. If you are not enrolled in any of the Moodle communities, which includes the PDRF community, as well as the supervisor community, please send us an email on supervision calls. I will also type in the email under the chat, whereby you will tell us your student or staff number and your details as if you are a staff or a PDRF. Then we will enroll you to your respective model community. Alternatively, we have now implemented and integrated an RCD MS, which is a management system that offers all the research capacity development unit services, such as workshop events, as well as the writing consultations. So if you want to explore that system or navigate around it, it's under services. You log into your link, go to services, and then the last option is RCDMS. If you are unable or having any experiencing errors with registration, don't hesitate to email us on RCT inquiries or supervision calls. Alternatively, if you are around the campus, you can visit our offices at Akanya Building Postgraduate School or visit the library. Today, one of my colleagues is at the library here at Auckland Park campus. So at the postgraduate section, level 2, and then he will be able to assist you with the registration towards the RCT management system. So the system entails all the services that we offering and an effective and efficient way of booking and registering for our events. So I'll be also sharing a feedback evaluation form under the chat. Colleagues, we kindly request you to fill that evaluation in. It helps us in terms of planning future workshops and also to now find possible ways of improving our services that we are offering. Also to give feedback to our facilitators because they are taking their time to facilitate these kinds of workshop, as well as to give us their insights. So if we give them a feedback as to how the workshop went, what the audience are saying regarding the workshop, and that gives them more motivation to assist us in upcoming of the workshop. So without any further waste of time, colleagues, now allow me to introduce our facilitator. We are honored to be joined once again by Dr. Lorenzo David, who will be facilitating today's session. Dr. Lorenzo David is currently a coordinator at the Research Capacity Development Unit, Postgraduate School at University of Johannesburg. Dr. Lorenzo David was recently awarded a PhD in biochemistry for his assessment of transferring tagged gold palladium and gold palladium bimetallic nanoparticles and their potential for anti-cancer drug delivery at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. By adapting a holistic approach to education, Dr. Lorenzo David hopes to inspire students to achieve potential and academic success with a hands-on and learner-centric approach to value-based learning. So with that being said, colleagues, to those that joined late, the discussion points, I will also be sharing under the chat. You are more than welcome to answer those questions at any point of the session. If you do have a question, just raise a hand or just type under the chat, and then I will notify our facilitator that someone has a contribution, and then we will attend to you. Let's warmly welcome our facilitator, Dr. Lorenzo. Thank you for taking your time to facilitate today's workshop. We look forward towards your contribution or your insights with the topic of today. Thank you so much. You can now start your presentation. Thank you, colleagues, once again for attending.
Thank you, Mr. Nkosi, for that introduction. And it's actually I who am honored to be able to present today on this topic. So I hope it's going to be an engaging topic where there's a bit of discussion that's also going on around this, which is quite a critical topic, especially when it comes to research. So before I begin, I'd like to welcome all of the attendees to today's session. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to to join us here. And I hope that this is going to be an eventful and something that is of benefit to many of us who are in the session today. So I'm just going to share my slides, and then hopefully, Mr. Nkosi, if you can let me know if you're able to see my slides. And I'll just put it on presenter mode.
Yes, Doc, we can see your slide clearly. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Excuse me. So, like we have discussed, the topic of today's presentation, or workshop rather, is centered around authorship and publication ethics. And we've tried to focus more on navigating the responsibilities. But in addition to this, we want to kind of identify some of the common pitfalls in terms of publication ethics, how we can avoid it, how we can protect ourselves, and the importance of doing this as well. So I'm going to try and keep this presentation, as always, a bit shorter, so leaving room for discussion. So some of the key points that I think would be important for us to discuss today, and as we go through the presentation, we're going to cover this, would be issues surrounding why publication ethics matter, understand a bit about the evolving landscape of authorship, and then we're going to delve a bit deeper into the ICMJE or ICJME criteria for authorship. We're also going to go on afterward to what is the criteria and standards in order for you to be considered an author. And by having a framework which we can refer against, this can actually limit any issues that we will have in terms of assigning authorship to contributors of a particular paper. And we're going to delve a bit deeper into this in terms of what exactly constitutes an author. If someone is doing, let's just say, analysis, or if they, drawing up some graphs for you, does that constitute them being an author on your paper? And how can you address these sort of issues? We're also going to have, I think there's 2 case studies that I'd like to discuss, and hopefully there'll be some input from the audience as well in terms of, in terms of this topic. Then we're going to just touch on some publication ethics and misconduct. We're going to give us some practical tips in terms of best practices, and then we're also going to briefly discuss predatory publishing. What is it exactly? What is the danger that it poses to academic integrity? And how can it actually be dangerous for an academic if we are caught up in this trap, shall we say? So as we can see, we tried to cover a few different aspects of the topic, and I hope that there will be discussion. Please feel free at any point to unmute your mic, and feel free to interrupt me at any point if there's something you'd like to discuss or a different perspective that you have. I'd also like to bring your attention to the slide which was posted up previously. I think it was posted up from 10 o'clock. Mr. Nkosi will also pop those questions into the chat. And if at any point during the presentation you feel that you would like to share on this, please feel free. We'd like to improve engagement, and that's the way that we all are going to learn as well, not just from my perspective, but from the perspective of everyone who is attending today's session. So I guess we can start. So I think the first question, which is important, is, and which many of us may have an answer to, would be, why exactly does publication ethics matter? And I've broken it down into 5 core principles. And I think these are something that we should, try and be cognizant of, and try to align ourselves with. The first one will be, publication ethics matters because in terms of accountability. If, for example, there's an issue surrounding ethics, we understand that every author becomes legally responsible for work integrity. So therefore, if we have a paper that is being published and there are 5 contributors on it, it is the duty of all 5 authors to ensure that the work that is being represented or being published is actually true, and that it meets up to the ethical standards. The next one will be in terms of reputation. So we understand that when we publish a paper, there are certain statistics which are generated from it in terms of your citation metrics and your H index. And obviously, this will have an effect on your academic reputation. So by safeguarding our publication ethics, we can enhance these aspects and obviously also use these as tools to ensure that we are traveling along the right guidelines. Publication ethics matters in terms of funding. We understand that many grant requirements will require things like ethical clearance, but also in terms of protecting your integrity as a researcher and protecting your reputation as a researcher, especially when you are applying for funding. We don't want to be in a situation where our name is associated with a paper that has been retracted or has been removed due to there being ethical concerns surrounding it. We understand that there's also legal implications when it comes to publication ethics, and issues surrounding retraction. These can result in consequences and also make us liable for any damage which would be caused. And I think an important one, and one that I like to talk about quite often, is actually public trust. So if we are able to align ourselves according to guidelines in terms of ethical frameworks, It all it does is that it will enhance public trust in research institutes, in universities, and in the type of work that's coming out of universities, especially. I think that if we look at the media generally today, bad news gets way more coverage than good news. So we want to try and limit, obviously, any negative exposure that we will have in terms of research as a whole and how the public actually views academic institutions. So I'd like to take us quickly through some of the basically the historical evolution uh, in terms of publication ethics. And then we can start off with, and this is something that I was quite surprised about when I was doing some research, in that the first academic journal was actually published in 1665, and it was the Journal of Philosophical Transactions, and this was of the Royal Society of London. So as we can see, academic journals have been around for a very long time. And as we go through this presentation, we can see that how basically behaviors have changed from what was accepted in, let's just say, 1665 all the way up to today, and what are some of the current implications and how technology has actually affected issues surrounding research publication ethics. So we're going to go a bit more into the ICJME criteria. This was first established in 1985, and it's essentially a framework in which what constitutes an author, and it goes in to give us a bit of guidelines. Now, this was previously known as the Uniform Requirements for Manuscripts, and this was first published in 1978, and thereafter it was actually changed to the ICJME in 1985. Then we go on to, in 1997, there was the development of the Committee of Publication Ethics, known as COPE. And in 2010, there's actually something was developed, which is called credits, which is the contributor roles taxonomy, essentially assigning, let's just say, authorship positions when it comes to your papers. And in 2020, as all of us would know, there is a huge debate going on at the moment regarding AI authorship, and I think this is something that's good for us to discuss as well. So as we can see, as it moves on, how technology is actually influencing the evolution of publication. So I always think it's important for us to understand where we're coming from, to understand where we're going. And if we look at a bit of the historical perspectives, we can understand that previously, if we look at papers, especially for science background, so if I look from papers, let's just say from the 1950s, 1960s, around that date there, we'll see that they are primarily solo authors. And if we compare that to today, we see generally, especially if you're looking at your very high Q1 high impact factor journals. For us in science, it'll be something like Nature, depending on the specific journal. But in order to publish in these specific journals, generally it will require collaborations because of the scope of work that needs to be done, as well as the time frame, because obviously you're competing to get your novel idea out as soon as possible. So as we look at it previously, they would be solo authors, and today there's generally large collaborations, especially on certain types of work. Not saying this is the hard and fast rule, but these are the general trends that we can identify. If we look at currently, we see there's a increasing complexity in terms of the research, and especially dealing in interdisciplinary work. And we also understand there's also a growing number in the number of authors per paper. So now that we've gone through some of the history, I'd just like to take us through some of the authorship criteria as well as the standards. So I'm going to refer to the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, ICJME. And this is basically a framework which many of the medical journals, biomedical journals, would actually align towards. There will be specific frameworks for each of your specific faculties or areas, shall we say. So we can always provide that information upon request at the end of the presentation or after the presentation as well. But as this is my experience, this is what I'd like to speak on. But generally, in terms of the criteria for authorship, it is adopted across several different disciplines. So as we've said, the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, which will be referred to as ICJME, is actually a group of editors from various major medical journals. And they collaborate to establish guidelines and standards for publishing. And many of us will actually have to align, and we align ourselves to these guidelines, particularly in the field of medical research. So this is actually a topic that, or some points that we've touched on in previous workshops which have occurred during the week. And I think it's important for us to clarify what exactly is the criteria for authorship. When it comes to this, we understand that all authors should meet all four of these criteria in order for them to be granted authorship. The first one is going to be substantial contributions to the conception, conceptualization, design, data acquisition, or analysis and interpretation. Now, a key factor for us to understand here is that authors need to meet all four of these criteria. So even if a paper has been drafted, but yet you need this one critical piece of analysis to be done, that poses an ethical question that does the person who performs that analysis actually deserve authorship? Or could we rather acknowledge them in the acknowledgement section of the paper? The next point would be that they would have to be involved in the drafting or critically revising of the manuscript for the intellectual content. So obviously they're pouring some of their own input into this paper. The third one is that they'll have to be involved in the final approval of the version which will be submitted to be published. And the last one will be they will have to be present on the agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work. So in this regard, we understand when we are assigning our name to a paper, when we are granted authorship, with those rights come responsibilities, obviously. And these are just some things for us to be aware of. So when we look at some of the common misapplications, so common errors that people make or gray areas that we find in terms of what constitutes a person getting authorship. The first one would be mistaking data collection for study design. So study design will essentially be you performing your map of the methodology, what type of data are you going to collect, how the data is going to be collected, rather the analysis of the data. That is what obviously study design is actually going to be. It's obviously a plan for your entire study. Data collection differs from that significantly because it is a manual process. The next one would be equating technical writing with intellectual contribution. So this is something that we've spoken of before where, you could have, there are fantastic researchers out there. I mean, if we just have to go onto Google Scholar or PubMed, wherever it may be, and you read some of the papers and it's like, you can be so impressed by people's minds in terms of the type of work that's been put out. But however, we see that English is not and I'll use this example, English is not the first language for many researchers out there. It may be, there are many researchers who obviously English will be their second language or whatever it may be. And in that case there, do we assign authorship to an individual who has taken my draft, which I've wrote, and the English may not be so good, and they've basically polished it up or added some technical bits to it as well? And the other misapplication would be assuming approval equals endorsement without review. And this is something which is actually quite important for us as well too. So if we can go a bit more into the ICJME, basically this criteria is, in terms of the medical journals, represents a gold standard for authorship. It's something we all try to align ourselves with. This is especially true in the biomedical fields. Now, all four criteria we have discussed need to be met, and substantial contribution alone is not, or basically is insufficient. And the point of this is that this framework helps distinguish between contributors who merit authorship to those who should be acknowledged in other ways. So I hope that everyone's with me so far. So when we move beyond the ICJME, basically, and other authorship guidelines, there are other guidelines which have been put in place, and we've mentioned a few of these before. The first one is going to be the Committee on Publication Ethics, and this essentially provides guidance on handling disputes and misconduct. And the next one in terms of science, again, is going to be the Council of Science Editors, and this basically emphasizes transparency in author contributions. I would like to put a disclaimer in here at this point that there will be discipline-specific guidelines, and obviously there will also be individual journal requirements. And then we also go on to some institutional policies in terms of what constitute an author. The reason that all of these policies and guidelines have been put in place, because we understand that when it comes to your name appearing on a paper as an author, there are certain, obviously there are numerous advantages that come with that. If we can look in terms of your progress, if your manager is tracking your progress in terms of promotion, in terms of funding. So we need to have these guidelines in place to ensure that, people's names who appear on these papers actually should be there, they deserve to be there, and that they can get their just due for the hard work that they actually put into it as well. Okay, so let's look at some examples of contributors who are not authors. What are some examples of these? So it's important for us to acknowledge people and to acknowledge individuals or groups who have assisted us in, let's just say, analysis, technical help. And these are some examples that we've actually gone through here. So it's important for us to acknowledge individuals who have provided technical help, um, or have contributed to writing assistance. Like we said, if English is not your first language and you need someone to actually be able to translate your paper from maybe your language or your level of English to something which would be up to the standard of being published in a good impact factor journal. Those who also gave general support, if they gave general support throughout your study design or throughout the carrying out of your experiments, your analysis, whatever it may be, they can be acknowledged in the paper. Those who provided financial or material support. I think this obviously generally goes down in acknowledgements, and those individuals who participated in data collection only. So as we can see, a common trend is actually coming out here that we can refer back to. In order for an individual to meet the standards of being an author, they need to obviously tick all four of those boxes. So in summary, if we go through this here, we can understand that not everyone who contributes to research actually qualifies for authorship. And those that, as we've discussed, provide technical assistance, or maybe there's an institute that provide funding or materials, should typically be acknowledged rather than listed as authors if they don't meet all of the criteria. So many journals now, and we would be aware of this, would actually now use contributor statements, basically, as we mentioned, with the credit taxonomy, which is basically your taxonomy of contributor roles, to provide a more, let's say, defined framework and provides recognition for the various types of contributions. The example that I like to go through here is generally when you look at papers from clinical trials. And what we'll understand that a clinical trial is, by simple definition, they are testing, we can say they are testing a drug to test its efficacy on a specific population. And they will have obviously different cohorts, different groups in which they test this for. Now, important thing for us to remember is that generally, when it comes to clinical trials, these are funded by companies whose the actual drug is being developed. So if, let's just use a hypothetical example, if there is a drug that is being developed by Pfizer, let's just say it's an asthma medication, whatever it may be, and the clinical trial has to be run, Pfizer will actually provide the funding. Generally speaking, they will provide the funding to the group that's running the clinical trial. And when the group actually publishes their results, they will acknowledge Pfizer as being a funder, because that is also disclosing any potential conflicts of interest as well. So as we can see in this regard, how authorship actually ties into to other issues surrounding funding. So this is, in terms of common authorship issues, these are some points that we've actually discussed in previous workshops. And I will just go through them quite quickly. So what are some of the ethical challenges in authorship? And the first one we're going to discuss is that of gift or honorary authorship. I've used this example a few times. I'll use it once more. It's where we understand that in, generally speaking, across the globe, in an academic environment, there will be specific targets that an academic needs to meet in terms of number of publications per year. So what they've identified is that in certain situations, if I have two publications and my friend has two publications, but each of our targets is four, what we will do is that hypothetically, I will ask him to put my name on his paper and he will put his name on my paper. In that case, we each end up with four. And this is something which obviously is unethical, and because we do not meet the standards of what considers to be an author. We not have ticked all of those boxes. The next one would be in terms of gold authorship, which basically means we omit significant contributors, and basically this can be done to conceal conflicts of interest. So these are things that we actually need to be aware of, especially as our research moves into a space potentially where there is more industrial application of it. These are areas that we actually need to be very cautious about, because at the end of the day, the last thing any of us wants is to have any damage done to our reputation, something which has taken a very long time for many people to put together. So by being aware of these sort of pitfalls and some of these behaviors, which sometimes can even be done subconsciously or unconsciously, we can prevent and protect ourselves. Another ethical challenge will be author order. And that is where that credit taxonomy actually comes into it. How do we go about assigning who is the primary, secondary, tertiary? We understand how when we look at a journal, how these authors are ordered. Is it in order of whose idea it was? Is it in order of who wrote the most, who did the most research, who funded it? So these are all issues that actually should be discussed prior to a paper even being developed. So at the conceptualization stage, these should be put into a framework, and we're actually going to go through some best practices in terms of the author order, and also limiting some issues surrounding authorship issues. Another ethical challenge would be, what is the responsibility of the corresponding author? And one that actually comes, if we look at the point below, that is going to be specifically if we look at authorship between a student and supervisor relationship. So we will hear of stories sometimes, and obviously I'm just going to say in across the world, there's stories that pop up every once in a while where an academic has actually published a paper and has omitted the student's name from it, even though the student was involved in the conceptualization. They carried out the experiments, they analyzed the data, and they wrote it in the form of a thesis. So this has been extracted and now written into the form of a paper. And the ethical question arises, should the student's name actually appear on that paper? So if we are just looking at it from an ethical perspective, we can say, well, in my opinion, it would be yes, because the student has contributed significantly to every aspect of the research. However, we understand that sometimes people's perspectives are different. A certain academic may feel that I've actually designed the overall project, I've provided funding, I've provided the resources, and therefore I have extracted the data and I've rewritten it to present it in a way that will actually be published by paper, and therefore the student does not meet the criteria. So that is why when we have these discussions and we have these gray areas, it's important for us to refer to the guidelines. And obviously we have these guidelines in terms of publishing. UJ will also have its guidelines in terms of authorship, and we can find out more information. Obviously, the library will be able to assist us with this as well. Ethical challenges also come up in terms of large collaboration. So we mentioned previously, so I'll say in my field, if I look at some of the journals that many of us aim to publish in, but looking at the quality of work and the extent of work that they require, it is very, very difficult, would be Nature. If we look at the list of collaborators on these papers, it can be quite extensive in certain cases, because obviously the higher impact factor that you're going, the more difficult, more comprehensive the work needs to be, and it needs to be done in a relatively short space of time. So some of the ethical challenges in authorship can also surround, in terms of large collaborations, how does this tie into author order? How does this tie into the number of people's names who are actually going to appear on the group? Because if you are dealing with, let's just say, 3 research groups, and each research group has between 5 to 10 people, does all of their names go on it? So these are some ethical challenges which we actually have to address. And the last one, which I'd like to touch on, would be authorship changes after submission. So after we submit a paper, what are the ethical implications around actually asking for your author to be added to it? There have been some issue, or there have been some instances where people have actually requested that one person be removed, another person be added. And in that case, there ethically we can ask ourselves, is the name who is being added, why were they not added in the first place? And secondly, do they meet the criteria? Um, there was, if I can speak a bit from my personal experience, I was working for a company previously to joining UJ, and we dealt a lot in terms of publications and that sort of thing, developing publications and presentations. So there was a point of discussion that actually came up surrounding this issue where there was this huge clinical study which was actually done, millions and millions or hundreds of millions of dollars was actually poured into it, into the clinical study, into the development of the drug, and at the onset there was a clear definition of who the authors were. Just before the paper is going to be published, like finally it's been accepted and now it's going to be published, there was a request to actually change the author, one of the authors, or add an author onto the paper. And at that case, it raised some ethical questions in terms of why was it not actually mentioned previously. And they, in this case specifically, they actually had to provide or substantiate why exactly they are adding on this author. And obviously the final decision will actually lie with the editor as well, to see if they actually meet the criteria. So we can see how in the real world these ethical challenges in authorship actually can play quite a big role. And sometimes, if you're investing so much of time, effort, and money into a specific research project, we want to try and limit any ethical questions at all. We want to try and obviously do things according to the guidelines and do to the best of our ability. So it's just something for us to be aware of. So,
Sorry,
what
Doc,
are
to interrupt.
Mhm.
There is a hand raised by Dr. Beauty.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Beauty, please
Yes.
go ahead.
Okay, morning team. So I wanted to also comment on one of the maybe another ethical challenge that maybe students may face
Mm-hmm.
could be the fact that maybe their work is not viewed or reviewed by one person. For
Mm-hmm.
example, let's take you submit a chapter to your supervisor, and
Yeah.
then maybe there is a long duration to
Yeah.
get feedback, and then you trust that people who are ahead of you can maybe sort of give you a guideline while you are waiting
Yeah.
for the feedback on the other side for you to continue. And maybe that can also be because of maybe financial challenges. For example, if
Mm-hmm.
a student can say, I want to finish this year because
Yeah.
I'm paying for my fees, I don't have another sponsor,
Yeah.
therefore I need feedback as quick as possible so that
Yeah.
by November I'm done.
Yeah.
The students can find themselves stranded in
Yeah.
a way that yeah, their content can be distributed to other
Mm.
people as well, to say, can you please check and help if I'm
Yeah.
on the right track, not knowing that they're exposing their content to people that can have um, maybe naughty thoughts when
Mm.
time
Yeah.
goes, and maybe use their information to publish
Yeah.
articles and
Mm.
omit their names at the end
Yeah.
of the day. So
Yeah.
that's what I felt like maybe this as well, because I know myself when I was doing my studies, I could ask and like, can you please check for me if I'm
Yeah.
on the right track? Now that we are talking about ethical challenges, it's
Mm-hmm.
just come that what this can also expose as
Yeah.
a risk for
Yeah.
students.
Yeah. No, thank you, Dr. Beauty, for that contribution. Most definitely, I think you're very correct in what you're saying. The example that we can use would be, when you are, let's just say you are a PhD student and you are taking your work to present at a conference. The general line that I've heard from each of my supervisors is that you never take work that you have not published and presented at a conference. And I think that would be along the same a similar example, because if your work is not published, you can't prove that you were the one who originally came up with it. Especially in terms of a PhD where you need to show novelty, this can cause some issues as well. So I think it's a very good point to actually bring up in terms of we need to make students aware in that not everyone has the best intentions for them, and to basically practice some level of being cautious in terms of their work, especially if you are a PhD student. I can't imagine what you would feel like investing 3 years of your life into a project, only to give someone to review your work, and then a few weeks later you find out that a paper has actually been published on a similar topic, which invalidates or makes it necessary for you to actually go and expand on your current work to keep the novelty of it. So thank you very much, Dr. Beauty. I appreciate that input. In terms of common authorship issues, these are some of the ethical red flags that we've actually identified. I'm sure there'll be many more. And in this case here, I think it's important for us to actually use our, for lack of a better word, our gut feeling. Sometimes if someone reaches out to us, I know if I think back to, and this ties into predatory journals, which we'll discuss in a few minutes, I remember that I just presented for the first time at a conference, and they obviously your abstract is published in the conference proceedings. And I remember, like, I think 2 weeks later, when I got back, I was in the lab and I get this email from this journal, which is like, oh, doctor, and I was doing a master's at the time. They're like, oh, Dr. So and so, we have read your paper, and it's a generic. They just basically copy and paste your title, and they're like, we'd like you to present. And I think as a new student coming in there, it's very easy for you to get taken up by that because you're not aware of what's going on. So I think even in that case, there something doesn't, generally our gut will tell us something doesn't feel right. I literally just presented 2 weeks ago, and now a journal is all of a sudden saying that they would like my esteemed presence at a particular conference to present on my work. So I think when it comes to the ethical red flags, we need to trust our gut. I mean, working in a research group, working in a lab, whatever type of research that we're doing, we have developed this sort of the sense of be able to critically analyze is what I'm trying to say. And we should also critically analyze when we get these sorts of requests, because we need to keep in mind that if our name goes on a paper with a person who we are not completely, like, let's just say there's some issues surrounding maybe some ethical questions. If anything happens to that paper, our name is also going to be seen in the same light. So collaboration is fantastic, but we have to be cautious with who we collaborate. That's what I'm trying to say. Then there's also some other ethical red flags, which will be, can you please just add my name? This can be from people in your group, or it can be from maybe a friend of a friend of whatever. They can be some pressure to exclude contributors. That should make you ask the question, why exactly are we excluding this individual if they were involved in every aspect? They are some cases where there's offers to buy authorship, because obviously this ties in with other metrics, let's just say a citation index, your H index, as well as improves your standing in terms of getting funding. Then there's, like, we discussed the issue of last minute author additions, something which we need to be very cautious about. And obviously, if we are actually going to be doing this, there needs to be substantial proof as to why this person was omitted in the first place. And the last one would be some vague contribution or description. So even when we are reading obviously the acknowledgement section of your paper, or we're just trying to find more information on a particular topic, I think it's important for us always to be critical, especially when it comes to any vague contribution descriptions. Okay, so we discussed this previously. We said, how do we go about developing a plan in terms of authorship? So let's just say myself and two of my friends who are working on similar projects in our lab decide that we are going to write a paper, a combined paper, because our results combined will actually allow us to apply into a higher impact factor journal. So how do we go about, number one, protecting the friendship, because we understand that when these issues come up, it can cause serious issues, serious problems later on, even in your working environment. And how do I go about limiting any further damage, shall we say? The first step that we do is we document. Document everything, keep contribution records. And that is why it is so important when we are dealing with contributors to have an email record of it, at least an email record, or even if you're texting, whatever it may be. But if you have a conversation with one of your contributors, follow it up with an email and be like, dear so-and-so, as per our discussion, I just want to summarize the key points of our discussion and what we've agreed on. And I think that is a general rule moving forward with any behavior in any working environment. It's good to always have it backed up in writing. And it doesn't need to be like, oh, I want to have it in writing because I don't trust you. We're not going to say something like that, but we will just structure it in a way that allows us to also have a reference point, because as much as it can also be used as proof, it is also can also be used to track the progress, obviously, how the discussion is evolving, and then we can also use it as a point of reference as well. The next one is to discuss. So if there's any concerns, raise them early. Raise them before the paper is being officially written, before anyone has poured in numerous sleepless nights and is feels that they deserve authorship. So discuss who is exactly going to be, what constitutes an author, who is going to be the primary author, who's going to be the corresponding author, and then the orders of the author as well. Who are our acknowledgements going to be? Are we acknowledging any funding bodies? So these are any things that you need to discuss early on. And if there's any issues, we need to mediate, and this generally involving a third neutral party into the discussions as well. Because if we think about anything, if I am arguing with a friend of mine, generally, if we have that mindset, I am not going to listen completely to what he is saying, and he is not going to listen completely to what I'm saying. So we need someone neutral to mediate, and this can be done through, if you're in a department, maybe a more senior member of staff, or something to that effect. And the last step is, if you have not been able to come to consensus, then basically you can use institutional policies which have been put in place. And obviously, there are departments within UJ which can assist us in terms of authorship and what their guidelines is in terms of UJ's perspective. So I'd like to bring in, hopefully, some members of the audience in this discussion. And there's actually two case studies. In the next slide is the next case study. And I'd just like to get your opinion on this, and maybe answer some of these questions if possible. So the case study is as follows. A department chair asks a junior faculty member to add a senior colleague to the author list of a manuscript. And this is done despite minimal contribution from the senior colleague. So the questions that we will discuss is, what are the ethical concerns in this scenario? And what should the junior faculty member do? How might the situation be prevented? And what are the potential consequences of gift authorship? So I will leave the slide up. If there's anyone that wants to contribute, I'll leave a few seconds. If not, then we can go through it and you guys can add into the discussion, hopefully, as we're going along. If there's anyone, you can pop your answers in the chat. Okay, so in the meantime, I'll go through this. So what are the ethical concerns in this scenario? So in this situation, basically, it's illustrating power dynamics and how this can be used to complicate authorship decisions. I mean, what's going to be, if I imagine myself being in this hypothetical situation? I am an emerging researcher. I am new to the department. I'm in a very junior position, and someone very senior is asking me to do something. Generally, obviously, you would always want to follow the instructions uh, of your line manager, whatever it may be. But what happens when this misaligns with the guidelines? What exactly do you do? So in this case here, we understand that as a junior faculty member, we will face pressure that will basically conflict with ethical standards. So you're essentially stuck between a rock and a hard place. So they go on to say, what are some of the potential approaches? So when we place in a situation like this, a potential approach could be to respectfully explain authorship criteria, suggesting acknowledgement instead of basically saying that, this person should be an author. But this as well is such a delicate conversation to have, in terms of, you are telling your chair that, or your HOD, that, I believe that what you're saying is incorrect and I don't want to do it. So I think this has to be taken on board very cautiously as well. So how can a situation like this be prevented? So in such a case, the best way to prevent such a situation would be, in our departments, which I'm sure they already exist, to establish departmental authorship policies as well as once again discuss the expectations early. So if we're having a discussion with someone, or if someone is making a contribution, maybe before we even write the paper or they start their analysis, we discuss what their level of contribution is going to allow them to have. Is it going to be authorship versus is it going to be an acknowledgement? And some of the potential consequences of gift authorship: number one, the person did not contribute to the paper, and therefore are they actually going to take responsibility in terms of the content? What are the responsibilities that fall on them? Is it just that they get the name on the authorship so that they can use it for their number of units and they can use it for promotion or for funding? So the potential consequences, basically, it can actually paint you in a very bad light. So the second case study, I won't discuss in too much detail, but I will leave it up for many of you when we share the slides, would be the postdoc contribution. I think there's a lot of postdocs here today, so if you guys would like to actually join in on this, or maybe even share some of your own personal experiences, we would really appreciate that. So the scenario is as follows. Two postdoctoral researchers have worked very closely on a project, with one designing the experiments and the other analyzing the data. However, both believe they deserve first authorship. So if there's anyone that would like to jump in or maybe speak from your own experience, please feel free. I'll just highlight some of the questions here. What factors should actually be considered in determining author order? How might this dispute be resolved? What role should the principal investigator play in mediating? And how could this situation have been prevented as well? So essentially, in both of these scenarios, we are going to use the framework to guide us. The first point that we're actually going to visit is, does your contribution merit author in terms of these guidelines? If it's yes, then we should go ahead with the authorship. If no, then obviously we need to try and have a discussion around how else this can be resolved. Should one get acknowledgement? Should you bring in a third party to mediate? Something to that effect. Okay, so I'm coming to the end of the presentation. I think I just want to quickly go through, there's a few more slides left. In terms of publication ethics and misconduct, this is something we've discussed in yesterday's session, but I just want to bring it to our attention as well. In terms of publication ethics and misconduct, there are issues surrounding plagiarism and self-plagiarism. Now, all of us will understand plagiarism is essentially taking someone else's work and presenting their ideas as your own. Self-plagiarism is where you are recycling work from a previous paper and putting it into a new paper to be published again, which obviously is going to be a major issue. Data fabrication and falsification, this brings up major ethical concerns in terms of publication because it affects the integrity of the journal, of the paper, of the article, of the research as a whole. We have issues surrounding conflicts of interest. If, for example, the principal investigator on a clinical trial actually is a member who is paid by the pharmaceutical company who their drug they're actually testing, there is actually a conflict of interest. So that's something that needs to be disclosed, and most likely the person would have to probably switch over to a different clinical trial, as far as I'm aware, unless there's some sort of agreement that has come into place previously. Then we've got issues surrounding duplicate publications, where obviously you are repackaging the same information and publishing it in a different journal, and this will assist you in increasing the number of citations, your number of units, your H-index, all of this here, but it is essentially the same research. So that's something which is a form of misconduct. We've got something relating to image manipulation, and we understand that in terms of your images, let's just say if you have an image for a particular paper that's been published, in order for you to republish that there, we know that we will actually have to get written permission from the journal article because they technically own the rights of that as it's been published in a journal. Then we've got citation manipulation. And in terms of citation manipulation, basically finding, not actually using the correct citations, you just basically write out from memory and then you find random citations to fit your narrative. And then we've got peer review ethics, where there's been some issues surrounding the peer review process. So we're going to go quickly into
Sorry,
what are some
Doc, to interrupt.
Hmm?
Yes, there is a question under the chat from Dr. Emily.
Mhm.
Does self-plagiarism include extracting passages from an unpublished thesis?
Mm.
Uh,
Does self-plagiarism?
yes.
Okay. Um, okay. So I think in
From
this regard here,
unpublished thesis or working a paper. So that's a full
okay.
question there. Yes.
So essentially, you're extracting a piece of information from a piece of work that has not been published as yet. I don't think that that would be self-plagiarism as long as you say that it is taken from, let's just say if you work in a different study, then you can say in a study that has been conducted previously by David et al., whatever it may be, these were some of the findings. Self-plagiarism generally is when we essentially just repackage the same information uh, for publication in a different journal. I think a simple definition is that. So if you are citing a piece, in that case, you would be citing a piece of work instead of repackaging the entire portion. So I don't think that would be self-plagiarism as far as I'm aware. So I hope that answers your question, Dr. Emily. Okay. So in terms of best practices for ethical authorship, like I think we've discussed many of these points before, it is important for us to discuss authorship early and throughout the entire project. If there's someone that comes in later on, is their contribution significant enough for them to get authorship? Like once again, we're going to document all of our agreements about contributions and authorship. We will always follow the relevant guidelines and journal requirements. We will be transparent about all contributions. We will always address disputes promptly and constructively. We will seek guidance when needed, especially from more senior members of staff, and we will prioritize basically our integrity over pushing out a paper that's going to be basically in terms of timelines. Okay, then we on the last couple of slides. I wanted to bring this in here for a reason. Firstly, to further highlight the dangers of predatory publishing and to also bring in the fact that how in certain unethical practices, predatory journals can actually be used to boost your research profile. So it's something for us to be aware of, but when found, it actually has a negative impact on your reputation. So if we break it down in terms of predatory publishing, a predatory publisher is basically an organization or a journal that will charge fees or publication fees to authors without delivering legitimate publishing services. And what constitute a legitimate publishing service? That'll be your rigorous peer review, transparent editorial processes, ethical publishing standards, and proper indexing and archiving. So essentially, in terms of predatory publishing, it is a company which has been designed to literally make money. They care nothing about the integrity of the academic work. And obviously, if your name appears on such a journal, it actually can have a negative effect because these journals identified they quite often, and if you have published on them either knowingly or unknowingly, then it can have some negative consequences in terms of your reputation. And that is why it is important for us to have go through this identification checklist. The first thing is there a legitimate impact factor? How far does this journal go back? Go back into the websites, read reviews on the journal, especially if it's something you're not very familiar with. Not obviously, we have a lot of new journals coming out, so not every journal that has a limited history will be predatory in nature, but it's something that we actually need to consider. Is there a legitimate impact factor? Am I receiving aggressive email invitations? You know, where you can say, dear esteemed Dr. David, we would like to humbly request your esteemed presence at whatever, whatever, you know. In that case, or if there's constant emails coming through, invitation to publish in that regard, generally we understand that if, with our experience with publishing before, very rarely will you get, unless you have published previously in a journal and they are inviting you to republish or they're offering you some sort of discount for your next paper, very rarely will you get an email of someone unless you are a very established researcher. I'll put that disclaimer in there. As a general emerging scholar, very rarely will you get aggressive email invitations from top journals encouraging you to publish. Reason being, they actually have a lot of people submitting journals to them. So unless your work is extremely novel, or maybe the work through your supervisor or a reference, just be cautious about these sorts of emails that we're getting. Most of our journals will have a clear review process. They'll go through exactly guidelines for authors, and they'll explain step by step how the entire process works. So if this is unclear, it maybe raises a flag and would necessitate you basically going and doing further research. Then they have issues surrounding hidden publication fees, and obviously where they're not disclosing. I mean, the last thing you want to do is have to pay. They go through the process and say, okay, you owe us 5,000 euros. Not many research groups have 5,000 euros to publish a paper in a particular journal. This is obviously an exaggerated example, but you understand the concept behind it. And the last one would be fake editorial boards. There was a talk by a Professor Rudy de Lange, a workshop that was held last year. And he actually spoke specifically on predatory publishing. And this is where a lot of the information is taken from. And he actually mentioned that, you know, there was a journal who actually listed, I think it was a journal, yes, it was a journal that actually listed an individual, and he knew the person. So he actually just messaged the person to find out, are you actually an editor on this board? And the person had no idea. They've never even heard of that journal before, but their picture and their bio had been put up as being an editor on this particular journal. So it's always important for you to actually identify, go through the editorial boards, then go onto LinkedIn and check, is this mentioned anywhere else besides on this company website? And you'd be able to identify it in that way, identify any fake editorial boards, and this will be a major red flag. So what tools can we use? We can use general whitelists, and obviously the UJ has its own accredited list of journals. I will be sending this out. I will reach out to the library to get their most updated version, and we will also try and post this as maybe an attachment on the resources. And then, like we mentioned previously, check the editorial board for authenticity, and this can be via LinkedIn or institutional websites. Never ever trust just this one website. Be a bit of a detective, obviously, especially if your name is on this paper. So what are some of the dangers? I think the last two slides that I have. So what are some of the dangers of predatory journals? In terms of researchers, the consequences can be damage to professional reputation, inability to publish elsewhere due to prior submission, and dissemination of low quality research. What are some of the broader impacts? Basically, erosion of trust in open access publishing. Open access is actually something which allows us to disseminate our information much more widely. And the last one is going to be undermining scientific integrity, or rather academic integrity, across all disciplines. And I think this would actually be the biggest point that I would like to highlight. We all have a love of our specific areas, and none of us want to see that actually go into disrepute. So something for us to be aware of. And how do we go about protecting ourselves from predatory journals? We will verify the credentials using tools like Scopus, or basically we will consult with colleagues or institutional librarians for advice. And this is a key thing. Speak to your institutional or the librarians at UJ. They're very knowledgeable. They have all the information that you would require, and they can point you in the right direction as well. So you can use various resources. One that we found online would be Think, Check, Submit, and avoid unsolicited invitations unless they are thoroughly vetted. If you don't know this person and they're saying that they found your research online and they just put in a generic title, it looks like the same message with a copied and pasted with your title, just be very wary of it as well. So in terms of conclusion, I think it's important for us to mention that authorship and publication ethics are actually, we know that it's fundamental to the integrity of research, and we want to continue in that same direction. Some ethical decisions will affect individuals, institutions, and scientific enterprises as well, research groups, whatever it may be. The guidelines which we've discussed, especially from the ICJME, and we will be sure to upload further guidelines as well. They provide frameworks where basically your judgment is often required, and if you feel that you're not in a position to do so, then please, use the experience that is around us. Many of us who's coming in as emerging researchers, there is so much of experience in terms of senior lecturers, associate professors, professors, emeritus professors. So we would be quite silly not to lean on this level of experience and absorb as much as we can. So we don't learn from our own mistakes, we learn from those around us. So I would suggest, reaching out and making use of that experience. In terms of resolving issues, open communication is key, and ethical practice is actually a collective responsibility, especially if we are all publishing on one paper. So I hope that this was something that you found, or at least some useful tidbits in this presentation. I'd like to thank you for your time, for taking time out of your day, and I'll leave the floor open to any questions or contributions or any points that anyone would like to discuss.
How are you, boss?
Thank you.
Hey, we are surviving. We are alive. We're surviving. How is it going?
Sorry for that, colleagues. I think someone's mic is on. Well, sorry for that, colleagues. Thank you so much, Dr. Lorenzo David, for such a very insightful presentation. Colleagues, if you do have a question or you do want to make any contribution, just unmute your mic and speak. Alternatively, you can now type in the chat and then I will go through the chat. So if you do have, previously I posted a slide with 4 discussion points. So if you do have any input regarding those points, please just unmute your mic or type in the chat. Thank you so much, colleagues, for your attending, and thank you so much, Dr. Lorenzo David as well. So I'll leave about 30 seconds and see if we do have any contributions or any questions from the chat.
Mr. Nkosi, maybe you can share that slide of those questions once again, and then just give, if anyone would like to contribute, then at least they have the questions on hand. I see you already posted in the chat as well. Thank you.
Yes, I'll do that shortly. Colleagues, if you do have a question, just type in the chat, or you can just unmute your mic. Okay, there's a comment from, let me check. There's a comment from Dr. Akidele. Doc, thanks for this wonderful presentation. Oh, that was a comment from Dr. Akidele.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akidele. Really appreciate that. While Mr. Nkosi has actually put up the points of discussion, if anyone would like to bring in some of their own experiences, I would actually like to propose a question to the audience in terms of many members of the audience today are actually postdoctoral research fellows. And what we've actually been trying to do in recent weeks is develop some presentations which actually would be of direct benefit to you and equip you to go through this journey of your postdoc more efficiently. So I would invite any of you to, if you have any suggestions or any workshops that you would like us to cover, where we can find facilitators for them and we can actually put together these trainings, please feel free to email us on these 2 email addresses. I'm putting in the chat. One minute. These 2 email addresses, and with any suggestions that you may have, and then we'd be more than happy to actually put together some trainings which hopefully would be able to assist you moving forward. But for me, I think that's it. So, Mr. Nkosi, I'll hand back over to you. Doesn't seem to be too many questions at the moment.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc, for that. With the presentation that you made, I tried to go over those discussions points that are posted right now. For point number 1, on what constitutes authorship in academic publishing. I think an individual who have made enough contribution or enough contribution in terms of developing the research concept or design, collecting and analyzing of data, and also approving the final version of submission, and also making sure that they agree to take or to be accountable for the integrity of the entire work. And also those who give their inputs like thoroughly in terms of drafting or critically revising the manuscript. So that my take on that. And from point number 2, in terms of what ethical challenges can arise in assigning authorship, Dr. David spoke about gift authorship and ghost authorship. So I took those 2 points. With regard to gift authorship, adding someone who didn't contribute meaningfully, often due to seniority or institutional pressure. And that was the scenario or a case study that was posted on the chat or during the presentation Dr. Lorenzo made. And in terms of ghost authorship, excluding individuals who have made significant contributions like research assistants or early career researchers. So that might take on that point number 2. And also dispute over ownership order. So when you have many collaborators and so on, and power imbalances as well. So those are my take on that point of number 2. And then with regards to point number 3, in your experience, what are the core responsibilities of authors once a paper is accepted for publication? I think in terms of that, responding to reviewers, disclose conflict of interest maybe, and ensure ethical approval for any data used, defend and explain their findings publicly if needed. So those are my take. And the last point was what ethical responsibilities do mentors and supervisors have regarding authorship? So educate their mentees, especially supervisors, educating their students and co-supervisors as well. So and also model ethical behavior and fair credit practices. Avoid coercive or exploitation behavior when claiming authorship, and discuss authorship early in the research process. So in terms when we start collaborating, let's just discuss those things, those outlined at an early stage, so that there will be no dispute over authorship and the ranking of authorship as well. So, and also last point will be encouraging transparency and resolve conflicts respectfully and fairly. So I think, Dr. Lorenzo, those were my take. And now, judging from the presentation, the entire presentation that you made, thank you so much for such a very insightful presentation. I do hope and believe that the colleagues also have noted down or have learned something from this presentation of today. So if anyone has a contribution, or Dr. Lorenzo, you want to add something to what I've just said now, please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Nkosi. Thank you for that insights. I think the points that you mentioned are very correct in terms of I'll go through, for example, the one I'd like to speak about is actually what ethical responsibilities do mentors and supervisors have regarding authorship. And I think in terms of discussing it early, the points you raised actually are very good. I think it is important for us, especially when you're coming in as a student, to be aware of what also constitutes authorship to prevent any issues. So in terms of discussing, I think that's very good. I look back to a paper that was published. My supervisor actually took, well, she is obviously her research, but she took different pieces of data and she sat with us and we put together a paper. And we didn't really expect that, to be assigned authorship, but because it was each of our own work, she actually did that. So I think that's actually an example of a good supervisor, and something which hopefully we should try to model as well. So I see there's two questions in the chat. It says, when you pick someone's work and start all over again, example, background literature review, discussion, results, conclusion, etc., what will be the best order of authorship? Let's go through this. When you pick someone's work and start all over again, i.e., for the background literature review, discussion of results, conclusion, etc., which will be the best order of authorship? So this here can be addressed in, well, I would look at it this way, right? If you're saying you're picking someone else's work, meaning that you are just literally going to take their results and rewrite it, you're rewriting the background literature review, discussion of results, conclusion, etc. But you have not been involved in the design, in the conceptualization, in carrying out the experiments, analyzing the results, because here you mentioned discussion of results. I think in that case there, you just need to consider whether at all you would even be considered to be, would you be a contributor? If you're reworking and you bring in something new, if you were involved in actually the conceptualization, that is when you would actually be gaining authorship, or there's some sort of agreement that has to be made. But I think in a situation like this, refer back to the guidelines. What exactly does my contribution constitute? Have I been involved in every stage of this project? And I think that will be able to guide you in your answer. But I think at the end of the day as well, you would have to have a discussion with that person whose work you're picking all over. If I'm reading the question correctly, you essentially saying that you are going to rework someone's set of results and present it much more fluently in the form of a paper. So that there would be best answered through sticking as close to the guidelines as possible. There is a question from Dr. Emily Schmidt. In terms of academic freedom, what legal and institutional protections from UJ do authors have in case of publishing articles that are critical state and corporate entities where these entities perceive reputational damage? Oh, I need to read that one again. So in terms of academic freedom, what legal and institutional protections from UJ do authors have in case of publishing articles that are critical of state and corporate entities where those entities perceive reputational damage? I think before publishing such a paper, it would be wise for you to actually take that to the legal department, especially if it can be perceived as, like you're saying, reputational damage, where they can actually sue for you creating a negative image of their particular company. Now, I think there have been instances where obviously articles are being read, and there is, in terms of freedom of expression, but that freedom of expression comes with the responsibility that obviously whatever you have is based in fact. So I think if you have, let's just say hypothetically, such a paper, and there is even the potential for any sort of kickback from the organizations in a legal standing, I would say the first thing for you to do is to go to the legal department. We actually have, we've had a few people from the legal department who's actually presenting, and we can even try to assist with directing you to the correct person. And they would be able to first review the material before being published. So I know that UJ does have obviously a legal team which is in place, and they obviously look out for the best interests of University of Johannesburg. So the best thing that I would do is that use the resources which are provided to you before you even send it for the potential to be published. Let it go through the legal process, let them review it to look for any potential points where UJ can be liable for any damage. They can make suggestions to you in terms of how do we safeguard not only yourself in a personal capacity, but UJ's image as well as UJ in terms of financial implications, and they would be able to advise best. So I don't want to give you legal advice, but what I can do is I can point you in the direction of people of the legal team who would be best placed to answer, is this paper opening you up to liability? So I hope that answers your question, Dr. Schmidt and Dr. Adeji. So if there are any more questions, I think we can leave it for, well, I'll hand back to Mr. Nkosi just take over. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Schmidt, and thank you, Dr. Adeji, for that.
Thank you, Dr. David, once again, and thank you, colleagues, for your inputs as well as your valuable contributions towards this discussion of today. So thank you all for your active participation. And today we engaged in an important and thought-provoking conversation around ethical authorship, an area that sits at the heart of academic integrity and research credibility. Together with Dr. Lorenzo, in his presentation of today, we learned what constitutes rightful authorship and how to apply clear criteria. We'll also learn the common ethical challenges in assigning authorship, like ghost or gift authorship, and the roles and responsibilities of authors post-publication. We also learned the critical responsibilities mentors and supervisors carry in modeling and guiding ethical authorship practices. Dr. Lorenzo has equipped us with practical insights and best practices that we can take back to our research teams and institutions to foster more transparent, fair, and accountable research cultures. So, colleagues, we encourage you to continue this conversation with your respective departments, colleagues, and students as well. And do consult with your department or your journal-specific guidelines on authorship and ethics. So we're looking forward to have you in the next workshop, which is in tomorrow, on AI and automation tools for enhancing research efficiency. And that workshop will be facilitated by Dr. Arno Lu from CAT. So he will be taking us through that discussion. So we will share the registration via model communities and via email. And yeah, we will attend to those. I see, Dr. Lorenzo, that there is a question from Dr. Esther. In case where one has published in predatory journal, what can one do?
That's a good one. I think if you have published in a predatory journal, the first thing for you to do would be, if you've identified as being predatory, go and speak to the library in case of what the general approach is going to be. But I would say the first thing to do would be to retract your paper from that journal, even if it means you losing out financially. But first thing would be is to basically disassociate yourself from that, and thereafter you can go through any other legal steps that that maybe need to be taken. And in that regard, lean on the experience of UJ. Remember, UJ as a whole has vast resources. They have a lot of experience. They have a lot of help for us as well in identifying these journals, as well as obviously protecting us, because at the end of the day, the research that we're putting out there, we are putting the University of Johannesburg's name there as well. So lean on the resources that we have available. If you guys need any help, please feel free to reach out to us, and we will try our best to put you in touch with the correct people as much as possible. There's just one more thing that I would like to say before we all log off, would be I'd just like to bring to your attention that the Research Capacity Development Unit now has a page both on Facebook as well as LinkedIn. So in case that, let's just say you don't want to keep checking your emails, or if you do happen to check LinkedIn more often, I invite you all to please follow the page if possible, and we'll be providing some useful updates in terms of some training. We'll be having some engaging material that's being put up there, some obviously any trainings, any workshops, panel discussions, and events as well will all be advertised through that platform as well. So please, if you could take a second just to follow us, then at least you know that you have the best chance of catching any updates that we have coming out of the unit as well. So that's both the Facebook and on LinkedIn. So that's all from me. Mr. Gossi, I will hand over back to you once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Doc. I see there is a question or a comment. Please share the registration link for tomorrow. Colleagues, I did mention earlier, and that's if you are not registered on Model Community, if you are a postdoc please ensure that when you log into Moodle, you see a community titled Postdoctoral Research Fellows. If you are a staff member or you are an academic or a supervisor, you will be enrolled under the supervisor community. So if you are not enrolled in any, please do send us an email on supervision course. We will then enable or assist you with the registration so that you can get all the notification, all the announcement directly from your community. And there you will be able to see the upcoming workshops prior in a month time or so, and also to access previous recordings. So we do have recordings from last year that you can go back and refer to them as well as the presentation. We do keep the presentation of each workshop as well as the recording. So if you are not enrolled in any of the Moodle communities, please send us an email on supervision course. Dr. David already shared the email under the chat. Alternatively, we are now moving towards the RCT management system, the system that enables us to provide all our services in one place. So that system is available under services. You just log on to Ulink, you go to services. The last option is RCTMS. So you click there. If you are unable also to register, we encourage you to register with your UJ registered email. So it's either your UJ student email or your UJ account or your UJ staff email, so that you can able to successfully register. With regards to that, we have our colleagues who are mobilizing to assist postgraduate student supervisors and postdoctoral research fellows at all our libraries at UJ. So we do have a colleague from today at the library here at Auckland Park campus, level 2 postgraduate center or postgraduate session, who is currently sitting there to assist all postgraduate student supervisors as well as PDRFs with the registration to the system. Alternatively, you can also send us an email or visit us at the Akanya Building Postgraduate School. We will then assist you with the registration. Again, colleagues, I think a sincere thank you to our facilitator, Dr. Lorenzo David, for guiding us through today's critical topic. And thank you to all the supervisors, academics, researchers, and all the post-doctoral research fellows who made time to be part of this session today. So I've shared the evaluation link also under the chat. We encourage and urge you colleagues to fill that in. It takes about 2 minutes. It helps us in terms of planning a workshop and improving our service delivery as the unit here at the postgraduate school. We hope to see you again in our upcoming research capacity development workshops, which is on AI tomorrow at 10. As I've mentioned earlier, the registration will be shared to your Moodle communities. Alternative, you can register via the RCT management system. Thank you, colleagues, once again for taking your time. We look forward to have you in the upcoming workshop. Thank you so much. You can have a great day further. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.